So we're kind of wrapping up on time here. And Christian, do you think you could talk a little bit about like some of the research? I know Christian's done a lot of research on Miami specifically. So if you can talk about a little bit, bringing it back to like why we need to target Miami. Like, I mean, we all know why we need to get Miami off of coal. But one thing that we wanted to do with Coal Week is have a petition that kind of, and we've talked to Dr. Prithridge, the sustainability coordinator. One thing we want to do is have a petition that says, you know, we want X amount of renewables out, like for Miami by this time, have a really specific ask, and then get students behind that, because there's a lot of institutional stuff going on at Miami, but that's just it. It's been institutionalized, and so the green movement here is greenwashed out of our control, and now it's in the institution, and that also is not okay, because we pay the tuition, just like the taxpayers pay for the government, and we pay the tuition at this school. And so we should be the ones demanding, let us be conscious consumers, because we give a shit.
Wait, I pay you tuition.
I mean, my parents pay my tuition, and I give a shit. And so,
you have to speak up.
I'm oppressing my dad. So, like, that's impeding the students that go here from being conscious consumers, because the institution that we go to has taken away our power to do so. So, like, I want Christian to talk a little bit about, like, what your whole week is connected to Miami.
There's a spot warmed up right up there.
Well, I mean,
And Ben Ed too. I know you're filming them.
I guess a lot of the problems, and this extends not just at Miami, but in the broader context, why it's so important to be acting now is that whenever you have a situation where companies, businesses, institutions have made capital investments, and we're talking about a power plant that's significant, they're going to want to get the most out of those capital investments, even if they're still like, oh, we want to phase this out, because there are a lot of people, I think, good, intelligent people who do not like the way our energy system works and want to see a transition forward, but are unwilling to do so because of the kind of sunk costs that they've already have. They're trying to capture as much overhead back of what they can. So, I mean, certainly with Miami, we have a coal plant on campus. I mean, it's got 3 generators that it can run on both coal and natural gas. If you talk to them, they'll say they don't really care which fuel they're running on, whichever is economically viable, like cheapest at the time.
These guys toured the coal plant.
Yeah, we toured the coal plant. We burn about 25,000 tons of coal every year, which is used to generate steam, which then heats most of the buildings, also works in some of the cooling systems. And we can also, we do power generation during peak hours, which saves the university about $500,000 a year, which is significant. So that's sort of an interesting example of sort of, a lot of times this energy industry is very like centralized. But we have a slightly decentralized system with our own personal coal steam generation plant. But really what we see at Miami is that we're not being the leaders. And I think this is one of the roles of, like, especially public universities. We should be leaders in energy policies, in social policies, and all sorts of aspects of society, trying to move things forward as the educated people that we're being supposedly trained to be. There is a social dimension and social responsibility to that knowledge and education. But to that extent, we are just operating in compliance with the regulations and requirements that have been placed upon us by the Ohio legislature. We have to meet certain efficiency standards, like 2014, that were put in place in legislation back in 2004. We had to reduce that baseline, 2004 baseline, by 20%. People in the physical facilities department will say that Miami was already moving forward in some of these energy policies prior to that legislation. So they say a lot of the low-hanging fruit, in a sense, has already been captured.
Years later,
so it's very. They say it's tricky to achieve that sort of energy efficiency standards. But I mean, we still see. The university is still picking up new buildings. They're still constructing things. We continue to grow. I think a lot of the question in all this is this whole kind of growth paradigm that we all experience. Like, growth will solve all our problems, even though many of our problems are because of the growth that we're experiencing. Our national accounting scheme with GDP takes, like, oh, it costs you more money to clean up pollution. Well, that's creating new jobs, so add it to GDP. Whereas, you've got to pay for your cancer? Well, add that to GDP. That's a transaction. The economy's growing. And really, these are costs being imposed upon society by different aspects, but we don't take them. There is no negative in our measurement of economic activity, and therefore we can never be in a bad economic situation. Like, this great economist, Daly, who sort of said, like in this accounting scheme, it's as if you grow and grow and grow until it kills you, and then you count your funeral expenses as more growth. And so, from Miami's perspective, we want to push for institutional reforms that state that we are going to be a leader in this sort of thing. So moving towards carbon neutrality, making sure that any energy that we do purchase, especially in the short term, we're not going to get off of fossil fuels in the short term as a university. But we can definitely be making strides forward, and we need to have a concrete plan on how to do this. We can't just do this incremental crap that's not getting us anywhere. We have to sort of set out clear goals. We should, and one of the things we do right off the bat is say you will only purchase the coal that we're getting from, I mean, as Elisa's pointed out, there's very little in the way of responsible mining. But to the extent that we can do that, that should be done. And right now the university doesn't have that policy. They just say we contract with a broker who contracts with other suppliers, and we don't know where it comes from. And so we're just, we're just this helpless market agent who can't have any influence on our economic decisions. We're just price takers. That's a whole other argument, probably. But so making sure that our energy is as socially responsible as possible.
Just know that if it's not mountain top, you know that it's coming from a community like mine.
Yeah.
So just know that it's like you're still again picking lesser evils, and,
Exactly.
and it does come at a cost.
Right. And I mean that's the truth. So we have to be aware of that and not say we've solved the problem, or we pat ourselves in the back because we've done this. We should be moving towards carbon neutrality. We should be heavily investing. We should not be saying, oh, let's build a new power plant, or we should be, we can, and with lots of gains in terms of efficiency. I would love to see like a moratorium on the building of any new, on the construction of any new buildings on campus until we have revamped all of the current buildings to higher energy efficiency standards. Because that's, they say it's not necessarily, sometimes it's not necessarily where you get the power from, but what you do once you've got the power. And so if we're just letting off all this stuff as latent heat, that's requiring way more inputs than is necessary. So bumping up the building codes on campus, and yeah, the university has a system where they renovate things every 40 years, they try to do building every year type thing. But there's a lot of, let's face it, there's some greenwashing on campus. How much have we all heard about the FSB? New Farmer School of Business, and it's wonderful.
It's so
silver.
green.
It's
It is so green.
It's a silver LEED certified. It's awesome. We watered the lawns for 3 weeks after.
And the lights are cold. We found like they're LEDs.
Yeah. So these are
Cut
problems.
showers for all the business professors that like to work.
All those bikes.
All
I
the
think
business
that's, you know.
professors bike to work. So they all live in Oxford. So these are problems. And so in that sense, as socially responsible as we possibly can be in the short term, developing the long-term plans to moving towards real social responsibility and social justice in our energy policy. Saying we need qualitative growth rather than quantitative growth that leads to improving what we already have rather than just expanding, and believing that expansion is in and of itself is good, because if you grow, and you can never have too much of a good thing if growth is good, so we can grow forever. And that's sort of, I think, what we should be looking at in terms of our institution. But also we've got 15,000 young kids, young people here who are supposed to be we're supposed to be these future leaders of America. But if we sit down and don't do anything, what the hell are you saying about leaders? So.
Robots if we don't do something.
Let's not be one of these Jane Jacobs credential factories where we just come in to get our degree and get out and work forever and then we die, but we've grown the economy in the meantime. Let's be people who change things, who facilitate what some sort of environmentalists have called the great turning, where we can turn around society, we can change the sort of paradigms in which we currently operate, because if we don't, it's literally going to kill us.
You guys are the cream of the crop.
Okay, so real quick, I'll let you guys get out of here soon. Thank you for coming. I just want to go over the rest of the polling real fast.
Yeah.
Hand me your hand, let me look in your eyes as my to feel human begins to vaporize. Maybe